Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue with our lesson in Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah and also Adab in Suluk al-Murid. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, okay, finally, just to check my sound, inshallah khair. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity for us to continue our lesson, and may Allah bless our lesson, inshallah, that Allah bless us and with the understanding and tawfiq that we are able and to put into practice what we have learned, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So inshallah we will enter into our kitab, and we are still at chapter 9, where Al-Imam Al-Haddad is speaking about the importance of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reflection, azikr wal fikr. So we have stopped at where he mentioned on the zikr of La ilaha illallah. So maybe today I will just explain the meaning of La ilaha illallah because of its importance, so that inshallah when we recite La ilaha illallah we can apply some of this knowledge. Hopefully it will be of more effect in our remembrance. The sentence La ilaha illallah, there is a negation. There is a negation at the beginning. It is a total negation. And then we have the exception. So in the Arabic language, whenever you have negation followed by exception, it brings about the meaning of exclusivity. It brings the meaning of exclusivity, from the word exclusive. So when we say La ilaha illallah, we are negating there are no God illallah, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we say only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the divine. Other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are creation. So this is basically the general meaning about this particular statement. Again, when we say La ilaha, so here we have the word ilah. Ilah in the Arabic language basically can be translated to God. And of course when we speak about God, we speak about the divine attributes. We speak about the divine attributes. So there are certain attributes that are necessary for the divine for God. So in the knowledge of Aqidah, we learn about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Qidam. That God cannot have a beginning. God cannot have a beginning. The moment something has a beginning, it is a creation, because it is preceded by non-existence, and it is in need of a creator to bring it into existence. And likewise, God cannot have an ending. God cannot have an ending. If God has an ending, it shows that it is contingent, because something that is contingent accepts existence and non-existence. Likewise, the attributes of Al-Qudrah, for example, Sifat Ma'ani, that God possess power. So we look at this universe and we see the effects of the power of Allah. The power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who brought everything into existence. So this is the effects of the Qudrah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there is none like Allah, or there is none who has the attributes of Allah, or has the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in causing any effect. So cause and effect are creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in the attribute of Wahdaniyah, for example, we say that Allah is one in His essence, one in His attributes, and one in His actions, three things. One in His essence, one in His attributes, one in His actions, meaning there is no other entity like the entity of Allah. There is no one who possesses any attributes like the attributes of Allah. And there is none other than Allah who possesses the actions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning in giving any effect. So this is the meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one, and Allah yani is one in His essence. So when we negate, we say La ilaha, yani we are negating the any form any of existence, any form any of existence, whether it is in the entity or the attributes or the actions. There is none illallah, except any Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we say that Allah yani is not in need any of everything, whereas everything is in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing any can give effect except Allah is one who gives effect. Nothing any possess any of the attributes any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and nothing any is like Allah any in terms any of His essence and His entity. So this is the meaning any in the Quran when Allah said laisa kamislihi shay'un wa huwas sami'ul basir. There are some people any who ask, you know, a lot of people nowadays, any for example, any they are influenced any by the idea of anthropomorphism, that is the idea any of tajsim. So there are questions any people, some people any ask any for example, Allah said in the Quran, laisa kamislihi shay. Allah any is not like any His creation, not like anything other than Him. So we cannot say there is something other than Allah like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you know, some people any are asking, but then Allah said wa huwa sami'ul basir. But Allah said after that that He is all hearing and He is all seeing. So this any all hearing and all seeing, we are Allah yani is teaching us any about yani His names. So why can't any we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a body? Why can't we say any Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yani is a body? Because any the mujassima, the people any who ascribe any to this idea any of anthropomorphism, or the idea any of tajsim, they believe any that God any is a body. Na'udzubillah min zalik. Ahlul Sunnah any refuted them any from last time any until today, that if God any is a body, any meaning He is any in need any of space and place, and all these things are impossible any for God. Yani Allah any cannot be ihtiyaj, and He cannot any have any this attribute of ihtiyaj, meaning in need any of something. We are in need any of a place, we are in need of food and drink. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of anything, so we have any to negate. We have any to negate. So that is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, Kan Allah wa laysa ma'ahu shay. Allah exists and nothing exists with Him. So everything other than Allah yani, we cannot ascribe any to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you see, some people yani, they have this some any misunderstanding any in this. Their misunderstanding is the verse in the Quran, laisa kamislihi shay wa huwa sami'ul basir. So they thought any that yes, nothing is like Allah, but there are certain things any that we can ascribe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from any the attributes any of the creation. So why? Any because they ask, for example, then how about any the word as-sami' al-alim? So now any when we look any as-sami' and alim, it is different any than ascribing what you call it jism, or we say Allah is jasim. These two different things. When we speak any about as-sami' and al-alim, these are what we call it the sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat al-ma'ani. It is not any sifat ayniyah. It is not any something any that is of a substance, meaning it is an attribute that stand any by the entity. Although any this is a bit any technical any in aqidah, but this is any the thing. We cannot make it as though sifat ma'ani is the same any as sifat ayniyah. You see, it is different any when we say Allah any is a body. If a person any says claims any that Allah any is a body, and that body yani sits any on top any of the arash, this is clearly any ascribing an attribute any from the attributes any of the creation, because creations are basically a body. So making similarity any like this makes any a person any fell any into tajsim. Tajsim any meaning the idea any of God any as a body. But when we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all hearing, and we say human beings any also hear, does it and is this any the same any as saying that Allah any is a body? Certainly any is not the same. So when we speak any about hearing, we are speaking any about an attribute that is from ma'na. It is an attribute that is what you call it that stands any with the essence. So it is not a substance. It is not any a substance. So there is a difference any between an essence and an attribute. or accident. So when we speak any about the attributes any of the creations, certainly the attributes any of the creations any are not the same as the attributes any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot any be saying any, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears, human being and he hears. And there is similarity between the hearing of Allah and the hearing of human beings. It is not any similar. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears? Only Allah knows, but it is not any the same as any our hearing. We are hearing any by our ears, by our eardrums and so on. All this any has to be negated. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala any is hearing, and Allah knows any what you call it, his own any attribute. So we cannot any understand the reality of the attributes any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope any this is clear, inshallah. This is basically to respond or to answer one any of the questions any that was asked any by someone. Now any we go back any to the word any la ilaha illallah, the phrase any la ilaha illallah. But anyway, any if you have any questions, you can ask through the YouTube comment. And if there is any question, you can ask. I will read any the YouTube any comment. Facebook comments any sometimes you have to reload, and sometimes any you miss out any of those questions. If you have questions any you can ask what you call it in the YouTube comments any, inshallah. So this basically earlier I mentioned the meaning any of la ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, there is any no God any but Allah. Any God here any refers any to an entity that possesses divine attributes. So there is none like Allah in terms any of his essence, none like Allah in terms any of his attributes, none like Allah in terms any of his actions, illallah, any except any Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we recite la ilaha illallah, so we understand that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is divine. Everything happens any by Allah, everything is known by Allah, everything any is willed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the creations any are all in need any of Allah, and Allah is not in need of the creations, and Allah has no beginning, has no ending, not similar to his any creations, and all these attributes any that we learn in the knowledge of Aqidah. So Al-Imam Al-Haddad any mentioned, this is the remembrance instituted for those who begin the path any to Allah. So basically Al-Imam Al-Haddad any is saying, for beginners, it is important any that they get used any to this recitation. But of course, I would recommend any that you study first any the meaning. You study any the meaning. And the way to study the meaning of La ilaha illallah is basically to go through the full syllabus any of a particular book in Aqidah. That is basically the meaning any of La ilaha illallah. Because any books in Aqidah usually is divided into two categories. Any one is La ilaha illallah, the other one is Muhammadun Rasulullah. So La ilaha illallah is a chapter of Ilahiyat. Muhammadun Rasulullah is a chapter any of Nubuwat. So learn any about the chapter of Ilahiyat. So when you go into the chapter of Ilahiyat and in Aqidah, you will learn the 20 attributes. So we have Sifat Nafsiyah, Sifat Salbiyah, Sifat Ma'ani, Sifat Ma'nawiyah. So all these definitions and understanding, everything any has to be at the back any of our mind. So when we recite any La ilaha illallah, yani these meanings we put any into the presence any of our conscience. Then inshallah yani you will see how yani it will give the effect. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with tawfiq. And join to keep to and return with it for those ending the journey. So it's for the beginners and it's also any for the advanced. For the beginners and also any for the advanced. So it is a nutrition any for the soul. La ilaha illallah is one of the important forms any of adhkar, remembrance any of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So not only any for the beginners, but it is basically a continuous any process of equipping any ourselves any with this what you call it nutrition any for our souls. He whose delight is in testing some of the secrets of the path and who wants some of its realities. So this is the thing any about learning any aqidah. One aspect any is about knowledge, the other one any is about experience. So we have any to differentiate any between these two. You can study any aqidah, but you might not have the experience of enlivening any this tawheed. How do you attain any this experience any by dhikr wal fiqh? Dhikr wal fiqh. This is what Al-Imam Al-Haddad any mentioned, dhikr wal fiqh. This is how we put into practice the knowledge any that we have learned. Then only inshallah ta'ala it will give us any the what you call it, the sweetness any of tawheed. And this is any important any for all of us, and especially in these times any of fitna. We are in need any of equipping any ourselves any with the strength any of iman and dhikrullah. So inshallah, I think for now any we just stop here, because any of time we do not have much time in reality. So I will go any into our next kitab, Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah. So in Muqaddimah Hadramiyyah, we are still in the chapter of prayers, and in our last lesson we are speaking about ijtihad. So ijtihad basically is to put in efforts to know yani a conclusion to something. So the application of ijtihad in the chapter of prayers is when, for example, you do not know where is the qibla. So you have to do ijtihad, and you have to put in efforts to ascertain to your best ability where is the qibla. Likewise, when it comes to water, likewise when it comes to the timing in your prayers, and we are basically in the end about the speaking about the timing of prayers. We spoke about the timing of Zuhur, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, and all these things. So the author is basically saying that if you do not know the timing of any type in your prayer, then you have to do ijtihad. And then he mentioned وَيَتَخَيَّرُ الْأَعْمَى بَيْنَ تَقْلِيدِ ثِقَةٍ وَالْإِجْتِهَادِ. Yani he's saying that a blind person can do ijtihad, or he can follow someone else who does ijtihad. So basically what he's saying here is, even a person is blind, he can do ijtihad. So a person might wonder how can a blind man does ijtihad, meaning he can do ijtihad with other senses. So he cannot see, but he can hear. He cannot see, but he can feel. He can smell. So a blind person he can perform any ijtihad. Otherwise, he follows a person who does any ijtihad. فَإِن تَيَقَّنَ صَلَاتَهُ قَبْلَ الْوَقْتِ قَضَاهَا. If one is certain that his prayer is before his timing, then he must make up for it. Then if, for example, you do ijtihad, and then you pray, and then it turns out that actually the time of prayer has not come, and you know it based on conviction, meaning somebody inform you, for example, or your watch is spoiled, for example, and then after that you hear the adhan, after you finish prayer, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, you hear the adhan, and local people, for example, tells you that the time of Asr has just come in, and you just prayed Asr earlier. So now it is confirmed that your prayer is not valid, you have to pray again. وَيُسْتَحَبُّ الْمُبَادَرَةُ بِالْقَضَاءِ الْفَائِتَةِ. It is recommended for one to make up for the missed prayer immediately. Meaning, if a person does not perform any qada, does not perform his prayers, then he has to make up immediately, and this is recommended. If he does not perform any prayers with a accepted reason. For example, a person overslept for Fajr. He woke up at 8 a.m. and he found out that he has not prayed the Fajr prayers. So is it compulsory upon him to make up immediately? So here the author is saying وَيُسْتَحَبُّ. It is a sunnah for him to pray immediately, meaning he can delay if he wants the qada. Why? Because he is in a state where he is forgiven in a sense. He overslept. Sleeping is one of the we say that is one of udhur. We don't call it any concession, but it is one of the excuses. One of the excuses, meaning a person is not sinful, unless if he purposely sleeps. If he purposely sleeps, there is a different situation. Here we are speaking about a person who wants to wake up but overslept. So he is forgiven in a sense, but he has to make up for his he has any to make up any for his prayer. Even now, pertaining any to making up, you know, there are people any who are spreading any lies any about this, and saying any there is no making up any for prayers. I will just like to say that the four madhab speaks any about the compulsion any of making up any for miss any prayers, making up any for miss any prayers. So be careful. Sometimes any there are people any out there who take opinions any that cannot any be relied any upon at all. That is out any of the opinions any of the four madhabs, which is not permissible any for someone any who to give any fatwa based on that. But now certain things any are being spread any into the community, so this is not any permissible. So there are people any out there, they purposely do not want to make up any for the prayers, because they thought any that it is not any compulsory, whereas any it is any compulsory. I've written an article any about this any a few years back. Maybe some of you any can refer any to that article, any some hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam pertaining to the obligation of making up any for the prayer. وَيُسْتَحَبُّ الْمُبَادَرَةُ بِقَضَاءِ الْفَائِتَةِ. Here the author speaks any about recommendation, meaning to pray immediately. Yani meaning if you do not pray any of the prayers, that you make up immediately. This is the sunnah. Not any about sunnah you need to make up in prayer. Making up prayer is wajib, but to pray it immediately, this is any the point any of contention. What you call it? Is it a sunnah or wajib? So if he is excused, then it is a sunnah. But if he purposely doesn't pray, then he has to make it up immediately. وَتَقْدِيمِهَا عَلَى الْحَاضِرَةِ الَّتِي لَا يَخَافُ فَوْتَهَا. So now if a person and he has not make up for his fard prayers, and now the time any of the prayer and he has come, for example Zohor prayers, the azan of Zohor and he has come. So which is better yani for him any to pray first? To pray any for the fa'ita, yani the qada, or to pray yani the prayers any at that point of time. So here the author any mentioned it is better for him any to pray the qada prayers. It is better for him any to pray the qada prayers. Why? Because the qada any prayers any is like what you call it, a debt any between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas the prayer any that you are in, you are given the time span. Yani even if you don't pray now, you can pray later. So if a person any pass away, he will be questioned on the qada. He will be questioned any on the qada, but he will not any be questioned any on the prayer at that particular time, because as long as there is time any to pray, a person any can say that actually, you know, I plan any to pray after any 1 hour any, for example. So he is not accountable, and if he passed away before any the prayers, but he will be held any accountable any to the prayer that he has not made qada, because that prayer any has passed. Has passed. So that is why the author any mentioned that it is better any to give precedence to the qada prayers any over the ada prayers. وَتَقْدِيمِهَا عَلَى الْحَاضِرَةِ الَّتِي لَا يَخَافُ فَوْتَهَا. But with the condition لَا يَخَافُ فَوْتَهَا. With the condition there is still time. But if you have not prayed your Zohar prayers and now it's 3:50, another 10 minutes and it's your Asr, then you should not only be praying Qada Fajr, you should pray Zohar prayers. Because if you pray Qada Fajr, then it is feared any that your Zohar prayers and it will also be Qada yani after that. So you have any to save any that prayer, because any there's not much time left. So here the author any mentioned, unless any you don't have the time. وَإِنْ خَافَ فَوْتَ الْجَمَاعَةِ. Now this is an emphasis. وَإِنْ خَافَ فَوْتَ الْجَمَاعَةِ فِيهَا. Even to the expense that he might not get the jama'ah, it is better for him to pray qada first. Imagine yani, you are in a masjid, and then you have not prayed your subuh prayers, and then yani, after the adhan, and for example you come into the mosque, you know that the iqamah yani is going yani to be the Bilal, the muadhin, and he is saying out the iqamah. So even yani, if you do not get fadilatul jama'ah with the Zohar prayers and with the jama'ah, it is recommended any that you give precedence any to the qada prayer, meaning you pray the subuh qada first, even at the expense any of not getting the jama'ah. So here any basically the author any is emphasizing that whenever any a person any has qada, he should give any precedence any to his qada any prayers over the ada prayers, and even if he does not get the fadilatul jama'ah, because any of his prayers, any of the qada, since any the adaan prayers, any he has time any to perform them. Wa yajibu, now he speaks any about what is wajib to qada immediately. Wa yajibu al-mubadaratu bi qada'il fa'itati in fatathu bi ghairi 'udhrin. It is compulsory, obligatory for one to make up for the missed prayer if it was missed without a valid cause. Yani a person purposely doesn't pray Fajr, and for example, he woke up in the morning at 6 a.m. but he purposely doesn't want to pray. And then at what you call it, after the sun and is set, now and we say qada, and it is wajib for you, and wajib that you do it immediately. Mubadarah, yani yajibul mubadarah bi qada'il fa'ita. That it is wajib any upon him and to do it any immediately. Because why? Because he does not any perform any the prayers without any a valid excuse. So now yani we will enter yani into the next any section where the author yani speaks any about the prohibited any timings. And in Arabic any we call it waqtul haram. The prohibited any timings, meaning there are certain times any that it is not permissible for you to perform any prayers. It is not any permissible any to perform any prayers. And there are a few types. This is anywhere the author any will. This is where the author any will mention. So he said, Faslun tahrumus salatu fi ghairi harami Makkah waqta tulu'i syamsi hatta tartafi'a qadra rumhin. So he said that it is not any permissible for you to pray certain sunnah prayers in other than Makkah. Why any not Makkah? Because we have the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the Prophet and he spoke any to the Quraysh, and he's saying, Ya ahla Quraysh, or the people any of Quraysh, la tamna'u, do not prohibit people any from praying in the Kaaba at any time any of the day. Or kama qala sallallahu alaihi wasallam, any to the nearest any meaning. So here any our scholars any mention, as far as Makkah any is concerned, there is no waqtu haram. So you can pray any sunnah prayers any at any point of time in Makkah, even any after Asr, after Fajr, at the time of what you call it, Shuruk, and so on and so forth. So that is why any when it comes any to tawaf and all these things any it happens any 24 hours any a day. So other than Makkah, like in Singapore, in other places, then we have any to look any at a particular time, whether it's time haram or not time any of haram. So number one, and he say waqta tulu'i syams hatta tartafi'a qadra rumhin, and this is any after the rising any of the sun to the span any of one spear. So before any the span of one spear is haram. So after any the rising any of the sun, the beginning of the rising any of the sun, all the way any until one spear. One spear is about 16 minutes. Yani to what you call it, to make it simple for all of us, it is about any 16 minutes, because our scholars any mentioned one spear is 4 degrees, and every degree is 4 minutes. So 4 times 4 any you get 16. This is mentioned in Buraitul Mustashidin, Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Mashhur, and he mentioned in this fatwa. So I'm more inclined any to this any more than anything else. I know there are a lot of opinions. Some people any mention any 10 minutes, some people mention 5 minutes. Wallahu alam anyway. Wallahu alam any bisawab. 16 minutes yani it is the safest, and this is based on knowledge of falak. This ijtihad any based any on knowledge of astronomy, and this is any one of the greatness any of our ulama. It is not any about what you call it ijtihad any based any on a person any opinion. So this is any the span any of one any spear. So this is any the first type. The second type, when he mentioned waqtul istiwa is the time when the sun is exactly any on top any of you. So it is any a few seconds before any it enters into zawal, illa yawm al-jum'ah, except any for Jum'ah. Jum'ah any also we have the hadith with the exception, and in that there is no waqtu karaha, yani in the Jum'ah, as it is encouraged any for all of us any to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to perform many prayers before the Jum'ah prayers. Wallahu alam any bis sawab. I have any to stop here, because today I'm not really feeling well. Inshallah, we will continue any next in our next any lesson, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.